Hello and welcome to Everyday Success with Doug Jones. I'm Doug Jones. Every week, now normally what I do is I bring you interesting people to interview. I bring you magicians and artists and musicians and just people who've been successful in life and have some interesting stories, some interesting experiences. And then when I don't do that, a lot of times I talk about success principles. I have other people involved. I have other people with me, and we talk to those people. But today, I'm going to be here by myself. And next week, I'm going to be here by myself. And hope you don't mind, but I'm just going to do a little bit of rambling. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about success. I'm going to talk about how you really can be successful. And I want to talk about, because in my industry now, besides doing this and some other things, I'm a mortgage broker. In our industry, we've had a lot of problems. This is September 2007, and we've had a lot of problems in our industry. One large bank just recently laid off 12,000 people just this past week, and a lot of people are having difficulty. And you know, a lot of people in the real estate and the mortgage profession, they are commission people, and it bothers them. Of course, it'll bother you too. But you know, we can all be successful. We really can if we start doing just some simple things. But we have to do them. The key is that all the little things are important. Everything's important. And that's what I want to talk about. And I'm going to use my own life as an example. A lot of you don't know me out there. Probably most of you don't know me. But I want to tell you, I was born in the Appalachians. And I was born very, very poor. And I remember when I was a kid, the way I took a bath was we would build a fire outside, and we get a large galvanized tub, and we would take buckets of water and pour them into that tub, and the water you had to draw from the well. So the house I lived in had no running water. It had no electricity. So we would heat the tub over the fire, and that's the way we would take a bath. And obviously we did not take a bath every day. In the summer times we did not wear shoes. So I lived that life for a while, and like I say, I was very, very poor. Then I actually lived, you'll love this, in the swamps. And I can remember when the storms would come up, that the snakes would come up out of the swamps onto the dry ground where we live. And I can remember one time that this fellow had dumped a whole truckload of fish into this field. And we'd walked out there as little kids, and there were probably hundreds of snakes all around us. And we're just walking through these snakes, and there were little coral snakes, and there were rattlers, and there were water moccasins, there were cottonmouths, there were all kinds of things like that. So then when I was 9 years old, because we were poor and there were 5 little kids and no father in a state that had no welfare system, my mom gave us up and I went into a children's home. And I lived in the children's home until I was 15 years old. So as you can see, my life was not the Leave It to Beaver life. Now, probably neither was yours. Mine might be a little more dramatic than some, maybe not as dramatic as others. So you know, it wasn't the ideal life for setting self-image and for setting success in the future. I came out to California, went to a high school that was ranked last in the county in academics, and I graduated in the bottom 25%, and I did graduate. The only time my IQ has ever been measured, it was measured at 95. That is below average. Now, what makes for success in most people? Usually it can be education. It can be they're raised into a situation with money. It can be they're born into a family with a large, extended, happy family, or they have a personality and they attract friends, they attract people around them. Well, I had a very poor education, obviously. I did not have the money support. I did not have a family support, and I was a withdrawn, shy personality, so I did not have the personality to go out and make things happen on my own. So why do I count myself as a success? I'll tell you some of the things I've done. I opened a large mortgage company, and I opened it with $600 17 years ago, and we've had years where we've done $1 billion in business. I've opened a company called Sales Magic, where I teach sales training. In that class, I teach a mental magic class. I've gone out as a professional speaker and a professional magician. So I've done a lot of things that a lot of people would classify as success. Even this TV show, a lot of people would classify as success. So I want to talk about success. And I want to talk about, you know, you don't have to have money. You don't have to have family. You don't have to have the education. And you don't have to have the personality, because you can succeed if you believe you can succeed, and if you're determined to succeed. Now, it takes really one thing. It takes, well, a couple of things, but the one major thing it takes to succeed is discipline. Discipline. Because what you're going to work with, you're going to work with your mind. And, you know, it's easy. You talk about people who meditate. They'll sit and they'll meditate for a minute or two, and then they get bored, and then they can't do it. Or if you want to do an affirmation, they'll do an affirmation for maybe 10 times, and all of a sudden they forget it. Or if they set a goal, and they want to achieve this goal, but bingo, you know, a week later something comes up and they forget it. They don't have the discipline to continue working and to continue being disciplined and continue to just become the thing that they want to become the success that they want to become. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about discipline, and I'm going to talk about some techniques that can use. But why, first of all, are most people considered unsuccessful? And I think most of us are successful, but it's the way we interpret our own success. We feel that we've not achieved, and probably most of us have not achieved everything that we would like to achieve or can achieve. You know, I think one of my greatest fears is that I'll die, and then they'll, you know, show me a videotape of my life, say, here's what you did, and then they say, bingo, here's what you could have done. And I think that's sometimes what we feel. We think, this is what I did, this is what I could have done. Maybe use the word should have done. So, but why is it that a lot of us, there are people born with good education, there are people who have good education, people have the money, they have the family, they have the personality, but yet they're still not successful. Well, when you've got everything going for you, that might even make you feel worse. But when you've got everything going for you, then maybe it's because you've been conditioned, just simply been conditioned to not succeed. And I'll give you a couple of examples. And the first one is the way that in the old days, I don't know how they do it now, but in the old days, the way they used to train elephants. And what they would do, the circus trainers would take, you know, they have a very large elephant, they'd take the baby elephant, and they would put the strap around the baby elephant's leg, and they put it really tight. And they make it tight where it's uncomfortable. And then they put a big chain with a stake about this high, and they put that stake in the ground, and the baby elephant would pull and tug and rub its skin raw, actually. Could never get away. Well, that baby elephant became conditioned to knowing it could not get away. And if you have the opportunity to go to a circus today, and you go around back to where the elephants are, you'll notice that those elephants are sitting with a little bitty stake. A little bitty stake about like this, and just a regular chain. Now that elephant weighs 20,000 pounds. It could certainly pull that stake up. It can pull the big stake up, but it doesn't know it. So, you know, the elephant's been conditioned. And a lot of times we are conditioned for things like that. I'll give you another one. They did some studies one time with these pike. I think the fish was a pike. And they put the fish in a big tank, and whatever the pike liked to eat, they filled the tank with the little fishes that like to eat. So it was just feasting. Then what they did, they put a plexiglass between the food and the pike over here. So the pike's over here and the food is over here. And there's a plexiglass in between. The pike would charge the food and bingo, hit its nose against the plexiglass. Well, after a while, the pike gets discouraged and realizes, I can't get the food. So it gives up on getting the food. The scientists took the plexiglass out. Even though the food was swimming all around it, the pike starved to death. Now, it's a sad thing to do, but that's the kind of thing that scientists do. And it also teaches us that conditioning, you know, this pike had hit its nose against the glass so many times, it thought, I can't achieve this. And so, bingo, it quit achieving. I remember when I was in high school playing football. I had a real low self-image of myself, and I went on later to play junior college football. But in high school, I can remember, I never started the game in high school. And I can remember I would draw out on a yellow pad, I'd draw out the position players. And I always put myself as second string. And you know, looking back now, there's no reason I had to be second string. When I played baseball in high school, now I was 5'8", 175 pounds, and actually I could hit a real long ball. But my coach said, look, you're not big enough to hit the long ball, so he made me quit hitting the long ball. I read much later that Mel Ott, who hit over, I think, 500 home runs in the major leagues, was only 5'8", 175 pounds. So it is possible for a person that size to hit the long ball. But you know, we are trained. I've given the example of the pike. I've given the example of the elephant. You know, how do they train fleas? Well, they put fleas in a jar, and they train fleas by, you know, fleas jump. Well, they put the lid on the jar, and the fleas, they bang their head against the lid. Well, so you're hitting bing, 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 you know. These darn fleas are bouncing their head on the lid. Well, fleas like to jump, but they don't like to hit their head. So what they did, the fleas would just start jumping just to the edge, just to the top, without hitting their head. Then they take the top off the jar, and in the old days, the 40s and 30s, they used to have actual flea circuses. And they teach these fleas to do things just by conditioning them, see. So it's really kind of interesting. I want to tell you what a fellow by the name of Maxwell Maltz, I almost said Maxwell Smart. Remember the old TV show? Maxwell Maltz did. Maxwell wrote a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. And in this book, he tells about an experiment that came from Psychology Today. And this experiment was kind of interesting because what they did, they had people go to the gymnasium, and they separated this group in groups A, B, and C. And they had these people shoot free throws, shoot the basketball, and see how good a free throw shot they could do. Well, they had the numbers on group A, they had the numbers on group B, they had the numbers on group C. And what they did, they told group A, they said, we want you to come to the gym. Now, you can look this up in the book Psycho-Cybernetics, because my times might be a little bit off. But come to the gym an hour a day and practice shooting free throws. Then they told group B, we want you to come to the gym for the same duration as group A, but we want you to sit in the bleachers and just imagine yourself making free throws. And they told group C, you go away, we'll call you when we need you. After about 6 weeks, they brought the groups together to retest them shooting the free throws. And group A improved 34%. Group C, the group that just went home, didn't do anything, didn't improve at all. Group B improved, I think group A improved 34%, group B improved 33%. Almost exactly the same. So he taught that we can do things with our mind by visualizing our success, and by visualizing our success, we will achieve the goals we want to achieve. So visualization is one of the first things that you can do to create success. One of the first things you can do, say, okay, I want to achieve this. Then are you willing every day to spend some time visualizing? Now look here. You get up in the morning, and let's say that you're a salesperson, and you visualize a successful sale. But during the day, you know, you're making calls, and all of a sudden you go in and you get a knot in the stomach, and you get nervous, and you're not saying the right things, and you feel afraid, and you tense up. And then that night you didn't make a sale. Well, that could happen 10, 15 days in a row. What do? You continue, but what you may want to do is observe yourself during the day, and if you find you are getting that knot, you are getting upset, you are getting tense, then visualize yourself as being very calm. Visualize yourself in the entire transaction. There was a fellow who came back from Vietnam, and he had been a prisoner of war. His name was Captain James Nesmith. He had been a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 7 years. And he had been in a 4x4x4 box. So he was in this little box. Imagine that you're in a box. They're not going to feed you very well. The hygiene is horrible. You can't even stand up. You can't even stretch out completely. So that was his physical environment for 7 years. Yet what he did, he thought, you know, if I don't do something, I'm going to go crazy. So what he did, he visualized himself playing golf. Now, he'd been a pretty good golfer before. He shot in the low 90s. So what he did, he visualized himself playing at his favorite golf course. He saw he hit the ball. He drove off with using his driver. He visualized where the ball went. He actually put the bag over his shoulder, and he walked down, looked at the ball, hit the ball with his iron, go onto the green. Then he putted, maybe a 2-putt. But what happened is when he came back from Vietnam, the first time he played golf, after being in this 4x4 box, 4x4x4 box for 7 years, he shot a 72. Now, 72 is darn good. I'm not a golfer, But if you ask your golf buddies, 72 is really, really good. His name is James Nesmith. Probably look it up on Google. But it's amazing. And he did this all with visualization. Visualization. So that's one of the things you can do. So I got the basketball shot. I got the visualization. I want to tell you, you know, there's something else, even, I don't know if it's more important, but there's something else. We communicate 3 ways. We communicate with ourselves all the time. We're communicating about 40 to 50,000 thoughts a day. That's what scientists are telling us, with ourselves. Then we communicate with other people, those around us. Then we communicate with God. So we got 3 sources of communication all the time. And, you know, I never thought of that till now, but maybe that's the Holy Trinity. Who knows? We're communicating with ourselves. We're communicating with others. We're communicating with God. Okay? So we're always communicating. So it's important that we start communicating with ourselves, and we do that by the visualization is one thing, but also with affirmations is very, very important. And, you know, they say that the best affirmation is I like myself. I love myself. You know, but you've got to start communicating with yourself all day long. I give the example of the salesman who may want to visualize his sale. Well, you know, that salesman, he can also start affirming. While he's visualizing, he can affirm at the same time, I'm a great salesman. I'm a great salesman. I'm a great salesman. Now, it might sound silly, but you know something? If you're failing and you're not feeding your family and you're not making your mortgage payment and you're not being successful and you're having health issues or relationship issues or money issues, what do you got to lose? You may as well go for it. I saw a movie last week, House, TV show House. And this fellow's wife was dying. She was in a coma. And the husband was praying for the wife. And House comes in and he says, I thought you didn't believe in God. He says, I don't, but I told my wife I'd do everything I could possibly for her. And if I don't pray, I didn't do everything. So what I'm saying is you might try some of these techniques and just go for it. So I want to talk about affirmations a bit. Okay? Affirmations. I am successful. I am happy. I'm wonderful. You know, you cannot, I'm going to tell you this. You cannot over-affirm your success. You cannot over-affirm your goodness. Because from the time you were 2, 3, 4 years old, all the time through your college, all the time you're adult doing things, you've had, unless you're the one person in the world, you've had people tell you basically you can't do it. You've been snubbed by people. You've been shunned by people. You've been turned away by people. You've been rejected for jobs. You've been rejected even for interviews. You've been rejected by the way you dress sometimes. You've been turned away. And, you know, so you cannot over-affirm to yourself. I studied under Dr. Scott, and he used to have us hug ourselves, and he'd say, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful me. Well, the same thing, Brian Tracy is big on saying, I love myself, I like myself, I like myself. He says that is the most important thing you can do. Now, like I say, first thing we talk about is visualization, but just the affirmation, I like myself. I like myself. I ran on one last week, says, I'm proud of myself. And you might say, I'm proud of myself. You can put because if you want to, but I'm proud of myself. I like myself. There's a writer named Louise Hay, and Louise has written the book, How to Heal Your Body, and How to Heal Your Mind, How to Heal Your Body, How to Heal Yourself. But in that book, she sold over 35 million copies. And she's been, I think it's been translated in 15, maybe 20 languages. And so she's very, very successful. And what Louise does is, her big thing is, I like myself. So Louise is kind of interesting. You go to her and say, hey, Louise, I'm having money problems. What can I do? She goes, I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to say, I like myself 400 times a day until you really start feeling it. Now, remember what I said in the beginning, discipline. I just said, she says you got to do it 400 times a day. Who knows how many times you got to do it? But if she says 400 and you want to succeed, are you willing to try to do that 400 times? You got to say yes. You've got to say yes. If you really want to try to succeed, if you want to really succeed. So she says, I like myself. Then a person comes to her and says, hey, Louise, I have a back problem all the time. And she says, oh, what I want you to do is say, I like myself. So see, for the money problem, she says, I like myself. For the back problem, I like myself. And then a person comes to her and says, hey, Louise, I'm having relationship problems. She says, oh, I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to say, I like myself. I love myself. 400 times a day. So her key is she has people doing affirmations 400 times a day. Like I say, you say, well, that's a lot. Maybe I can't do that. there's a book called The Way of the Pilgrim. Really an extraordinary book. And this book was written about the time we had the Civil War here, but it was written by a pilgrim in Russia. And in the 1860s in Russia, you couldn't just travel from place to place. You were confined to basically your county or your province or your state, wherever you were. You couldn't really cross lines. Well, this pilgrim had withered his arm, so he couldn't work. So he had a passport, so he could travel. And he was a holy person. And he was trying to find out, you know, he had heard a sermon one time, and the sermon talked about pray unceasingly. And he'd ask all kinds of people what that meant. Nobody could really tell him. And then one time he met a starlet. A starlet would be like what we call a priest. And this starlet says, what I want you to do is say, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And he says, oh. He says, well, how many times I say it? He says, say it 1,000 times a day. So this pilgrim started saying, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, 1,000 times a day. Then he went back to the starlet after a week, says, what do I do now? He says, say it 2,000 times a day. Okay, so he started saying it 2,000 times a day. Now remember, Louise Hay's only saying, I like myself 400 times a day. Then he kept going to the starlet, 8,000, 10,000. Eventually he got up to where he was saying the affirmation, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, 12,000 times a day. He said his mouth got dry, his tongue swelled, his throat hurt. It was and he was rubbing also a prayer beads. He's doing it to keep count. He said he actually got arthritis in his hands. So it's very, very difficult for him to do this. And then he went to the starlet, and the starlet says, you think it continuously now, and just go with the beat of your heart and with your breath, the affirmation, everything you do. I recommend you read the book. It's called The Way of a Pilgrim, extraordinary book. What's extraordinary is while he's doing this prayer, the things that happened to him really didn't affect his life at all. He was very, what I would call successful, doing everything that he did while he was doing this prayer. He was robbed one time. Didn't bother him. He was beaten. Didn't bother him. All kinds of events happened to him that, you know, we would have said, ooh, those are horrible events. And they would have upset us. Really didn't bother him at all. So I encourage you to do some affirmations. Say some affirmations. Try, I like myself, I love myself. And, you know, give it 400 times a day. And then let me know if it works or not. I'd love to hear from you on that. So, you know, there's some other things. It's just, there's so many things you can do. I'm looking, the affirmations are just extraordinary. But I want to tell you a story, and this was back before, I think it was right before 1913. There was a fellow named Ben, Maserati. And Ben had a factory in New York City. And he had this factory, and they made widgets. I call it widgets because I don't know what they made. And he had about 100 employees. And this was about 1910, and his factory was going broke. Now, this was right before World War I. His factory was going broke. It was getting Christmas time. And Ben was faced with, after Christmas, laying off everybody in his factory. Laying them all off. And he didn't know what to do. And it was Christmas Eve, and all the employees had gone home. And he's now headed for home. He's crossing Central Park. He's got to face his wife and his 2 little girls. You know, he's got no Christmas tree. He's got no presents, no anything. And he's feeling really bad for himself, like that movie, It's a Wonderful Life. And he's leaning up against a rail on a bridge, and he's looking down the cold water, and it's snowing. And he's kind of realizes this rail is kind of weak. And he says, whoa, I could just fall right over here. And my wife's got $100,000 insurance. $100,000. And he's thinking, wow, I could just fall over. And all of a sudden, here is this voice that says, stop. And he looks around, there's this little old man. The man had one of these big top hats and a long coat. And he says, I saw what you were going to do. Nothing's worth that. And Ben was telling him his story about how bad things were. And the little man says, you know, nothing is worth that. He says, now I'll prove it to you. I'm going to write you a check. And I'm going to meet you here on this bench a year from now, and I'm going to bet you don't have to cash that check. Now, if you have to cash it anytime during the year, you go ahead, but I'm going to bet you don't have to cash it. The little man writes a check out for $50,000, and he signs it, Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller. Now, can you imagine that? You got a check from Rockefeller? You know? So here he's got this check from Rockefeller, $50,000. He got excited. He ran across the park. He realized he didn't have any Christmas tree or presents. There was a drugstore open in the building where he lived, and the drugstore in those days had things like trees. He banged on the door. He got the drugs to open the door. He got all the presents he needed on credit because he was so passionate. They had a wonderful Christmas. He started getting excited about what he could do. He started writing it down on a pad of paper. He got excited. People started hearing about his plan. His creditors are now saying, hey, we want to be a partner with you. He got excited. And lo and behold, he had a wonderful year, had a successful year. He never cashed a check. And he never told anybody. So the next year, he wraps his family up and his wife and his kids, and they're going down to the park. They're going down to the park because he's going to take this check and give it back to Mr. Rockefeller. And he's got the check in his pocket, and it's cold, and it's raining, and the kids are cold, and they want to go, celebrate Christmas. And he can't find Mr. Rockefeller. He's not there. He looks around. Finally, they're going to start to leave. They're just going to leave and forget it. The little man says, he sees the little man, says, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rockefeller, says, I have your check. The little man turns around and says, excuse me? He says, Mr. Rockefeller. He says, no, you got the wrong person. I'm Andrew Carnegie. And at that time, an ambulance drove up, and these guys in white coats ran and grabbed the little man. They said, we hope he didn't bother you, and we hope he didn't give you one of those phony checks. It's your belief. It's what you do, and it's the way you do it. You can succeed, and I hope you do. Visit us next week, Doug Jones with Everyday Success.